Hello, I was watching the Olympics on television, and I wondered, what if Lara Croft participated? Would she perform well? If so, in which discipline? Let's find out. First, we need to evaluate her skills, which is quite subjective. Let's say that 50% represents the average. How much more intelligent is Lara compared to the average person? I would say 95%, considering she can decipher numerous languages, has an excellent sense of direction, and can pilot anything instinctively. Whether through her vocabulary or manner of speaking, she appears intelligent. It's clear she knows her strengths and how to use them to her advantage. For her power, I would say it is necessarily very high, since she pushes stone blocks that must weigh several tons. However, she does have limits, as you can hear her straining when she moves them. She can fend off a wild beast with her bare hands and climb walls with ease. She is also capable of hand-to-hand combat. In terms of defense, she is probably average. She gets hurt quickly from falls and can take damage from small spiders or birds. A simple brush with a spike is enough to make her bleed. That said, she can withstand heavy blows and resists gunfire well, which compensates for her weaknesses. She is also not immune to poison and fire, which is her greatest weakness. The slightest flame can set her on fire for a long time. We also know she is not immune to the cold. From an agility standpoint, she is clearly above everyone else. There isn't a single place on Earth she cannot reach. She doesn't have a weight room in her manor, but a parkour training gym. Regarding her health points, I would say she is slightly below average. Without the use of metapacks, she would die very quickly from things that would take longer to kill a normal human. Approximately 20 pecks are enough to bring her down, which seems a bit fast. Fire also affects her abnormally quickly. While a human on fire would eventually die, it wouldn't happen in just a few seconds. The same goes for cold. Despite her breath-holding abilities, she can barely endure a few seconds in icy water. For her camouflage abilities, she can be discreet, but it never lasts long. Except at luxury receptions. In other contexts, she tends to stand out due to her natural beauty and tall stature. I've divided the ranking into 5 categories. The events where Lara could win one of the 3 medals, a category where she would probably qualify, and a category where she wouldn't be able to participate for various reasons. Let's start at the bottom. It's hard to imagine Lara on a skateboard. Her balance might be an advantage, but given her tendency to take damage from falls, it's probably not a sport she would choose to train in. She certainly wouldn't fear the height of the ramp, but even climbing the ladder would bore her. One could also argue that she had the chance to pick up a skateboard and left it there, so I place it at the bottom of the list. The problem with this sport is that it is played in a team, and Lara works solo. She has occasionally worked in a duo, but managing her temperament in a team of 7 players remains unlikely. She certainly has a very high throwing strength and aims very well, but we rarely see her throwing objects. She is also vulnerable to being crushed, and although she is tall for a woman, she is smaller than the average woman in this sport. I think she would be more effective as a coach, spotting the evolution of the game and advising the team. Golf is known to be a sport for the wealthy, and Lara is very wealthy. It is also a solo activity. The problem is that, given her personality, it's hard to imagine her spending time playing golf. There's no doubt she would know how to play, but the Olympic Games are reserved for the elite who train constantly, which is why I don't think she would qualify. Same problem as with rugby. Lara is not made for team sports. She would shine due to her extraordinary endurance, but there is no indication that her adventuring skills would apply to ball control. Given the strength of her legs, her shots would be formidable. But power isn't everything in this sport. Since she has a very sensitive body, one can imagine she would immediately point out fouls, but it's not in her nature to pretend to be hurt. A solo sport requiring extraordinary reflexes, this could suit Lara, except that we have rarely seen her move so quickly. The problem is that her abilities are unlikely to shine in this sport. Besides her pistols, she rarely holds anything in her hands, at least not something as light. A difficult choice as it is a sport that requires balance, but Lara lives in a manor and spends the rest of her time adventuring, rarely at the beach. I imagine her more on a sun lounger than surfing. Admittedly, she is comfortable underwater, but the surfing competition takes place on water. Now let's move on to the disciplines where she would have a chance of qualifying. Although it is a team game, it involves short solo stages. There is no doubt that Lara would be formidable with a bat, but her endurance capabilities would not be particularly useful. She knows how to sprint and do somersaults. I don't rank her higher because the victory does not depend solely on her. She would certainly reach the basket without any problem, as jumping is one of her specialities. Contact is prohibited unlike in rugby, and the ball is heavier. The only problem is that Lara is not tall enough, which would affect her vision of the court and the game. Even though she jumps very high, other players being taller limits her ability to act. As Lara is wealthy and high-level equestrianism is a sport for the affluent, it's assumed she has likely practiced it and could afford the best horses. However, she is a bit too heavy, as riders are often light so the horse can jump more easily. Furthermore, it's unclear if Lara is particularly fond of animals. She doesn't have any in her manor. If the competition were on a motorbike, she would win gold. But on a horse, it's a different matter. There is still dressage, where she would look elegant in her riding attire, but it requires spending time with her horse to train, and she is constantly off on adventures. Like in basketball, if it involves jumping and hitting the ball, Lara would be very strong. The problem would be avoiding injuring the opposing players. Since she would not be alone on the court, I think she might qualify but no more. In this sport, attackers are allowed to jump above the goal area and take their shot before touching the ground again, which suits Lara perfectly. Contacts are less brutal compared to other ball sports. The challenge would be convincing her to agree to pass the ball. The opposing team of 7 players could force her to do so, and the outcome would then depend on her team. With few contacts and no risk of injury from falling, Lara should manage well due to her swimming skills. Given her strength is mostly in her legs, I can imagine her crossing the pool by swimming underneath everyone, but according to the rules, the ball must stay at the surface, so she would have to wait for a pass to score, which is not optimal. Lara's height gives her an advantage in tennis, particularly with serving, as her ability to jump high would make her shot angle formidable. However, her probable right-handedness might not be ideal, as left-handed players can have a slight edge in this sport. Tennis requires significant lateral movement, which is not her strong suit. Additionally, the shorter women's matches, which are played as the best of 3 sets, might not fully utilize her exceptional endurance. Even if she built a tennis court on her luxury property, consistent training would be essential for success, and that could be a challenge. This sport is similar to tennis but requires faster reflexes and closer proximity. The shuttle speed and the smaller court size mean the game relies heavily on quick reactions. Given Lara's agility and reflexes, she would likely qualify in badminton, though she would need to adjust to the more rapid pace and smaller court. Baseball offers more varied pitching options compared to softball, with a larger field and lighter ball. Lara's strength and skill could make her a formidable player. Her individual prowess would be notable, but the team's overall performance would be crucial. This sport, which doesn't involve jumping, might seem less ideal for Lara initially. However, her exceptional endurance could be a significant asset. Running while bent over and enduring potential brutal collisions could be challenging, especially given her physical weakness. Despite her stamina, she might struggle with the impacts and the lack of jumping. While Lara's experience with motorcycles might suggest she could have some advantage in BMX freestyle, it's unlikely to be very beneficial. BMX requires a specific set of skills, including initiating jumps from ramps and performing tricks, which differ significantly from motorcycling. However, Lara's great agility could enable her to qualify, and the strength in her legs would ensure maximum speed at the end of the parkour course, thus providing more height for performing tricks. Ultimately, it depends on whether her vehicle handling talent applies only to BMX riding or also to the tricks involved in BMX freestyle. We've already seen Lara struggle with a quad, and given that falls are her weak point, this discipline seems particularly challenging. Lara's speed and endurance would be significant assets in track cycling, where she could reach impressive velocities. However, the monotony of a track circuit might not align with her adventurous spirit, which thrives in varied environments. Despite this, if she were motivated by the sport or a challenge, qualifying should not be an issue for her given her physical capabilities. Road cycling involves more varied terrain compared to track cycling, but it still may not offer enough variety to sustain Lara's interest for consistent training. Her stamina would undoubtedly help her perform well, but the visibility on the roads and the lack of diverse environments might not make it an appealing choice for her, considering her adventurous lifestyle. Now let's look at the sports where she could win a bronze medal. Boxing combines durability, defense, and endurance, and Lara only possesses one of these 3 prerequisites. She has practiced the sport before, possibly due to her awareness of her weaknesses and her efforts to address them. Her punches would undoubtedly cause significant damage. On the other hand, the ability to absorb hits is not one of her strengths. Additionally, the fact that kicking is not permitted detracts from her advantage, as legs are typically used for evasion when it comes to avoiding attacks. Lara tends to favor jumps over lateral movements. Nevertheless, I believe she can make it to the podium, potentially by delivering surprise knockouts. Although the large gloves are designed to cushion blows, top fighters are unlikely to be caught off guard. Lara is comfortable in the water and capable of performing numerous acrobatics with style. However, her aquatic movements are often limited, and it remains a team sport. Nonetheless, there is no doubt that she would receive favorable scores from judges and the public simply due to her swimsuit and natural grace. This would certainly justify a place on the podium at the very least. Unlike boxing, which involves gloves and direct strikes, Lara could use the strength of her hands to control her opponent, and we know she is immensely strong in this regard. She could easily push her opponent out of the area, but this does not result in a win. Judo focuses on destabilizing and immobilizing the opponent, starting with their legs, and we have seen Lara being restrained by those stronger than her. I'm not suggesting she wouldn't be formidable, but the inability to use her legs for attacking is a hindrance to her more dynamic fighting style. In the Olympics, kayaking involves using arm strength to navigate through slalom gates and to maneuver against the current. Given her ability to navigate rapids, she would have no trouble being among the best. However, every player knows she isn't very adept at rotations, and the river's configuration might prevent her from progressing further. If the event were purely about endurance, she would be first, but with the clock, it's uncertain. This is a sport that suits our heroine perfectly. Not only does Lara have an almost supernatural sense of direction, but we also know she can sail and use a compass. Controlling such a boat requires endurance and mental strength, but also agility to avoid falling overboard in rough seas. Managing a sail and a rudder is within her capabilities, thanks to her talent for piloting virtually anything. The only downside is that Lara seems to be cursed when it comes to vehicles. Her adventures often end in crashes. It is highly likely that a whale would suddenly appear in front of her, or a volcano would erupt just as she passes overhead. This issue cannot be ignored. Once a sport practiced by the nobility in a protocol-laden and chivalrous setting, fencing matches Lara's lifestyle. One can easily imagine her training with her butler. With her precision, flexibility, and reflexes, a bronze medal seems quite possible. One of the few team sports where Lara could potentially win a bronze medal, as it eliminates the drawbacks of traditional basketball. With fewer players on a smaller court, Lara would likely excel even more. Her height is average for professional players. While it's prohibited to use other players as a springboard, it's not against the rules to jump over opponents, and her jumps are known to be spectacular. Contact is also highly regulated, making it difficult to injure her during the match. This sport combines fencing, 200m swimming, 3000m running, pistol shooting, and horseback riding. While Lara could excel in each of these disciplines, there is the issue of the horse, which is provided by the games organizers and can be unpredictable. In fact, equestrian events were removed from the list following an incident at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. However, the idea that a pentathlon could consist of only 4 events seems paradoxical, so I am unsure what to make of it. I believe the triathlon would suit Lara better than the pentathlon, as it is based on pure endurance rather than involving a horse. However, the absence of shooting, replaced by cycling, is not ideal. I find it hard to imagine Lara on a road bike. Although she runs without getting tired, she is not particularly fast compared to the champions. It's difficult to estimate whether her speed would be sufficient, but it's worth believing in. At best, the sand would reduce the impact of her falls in beach volleyball. There are fewer players on the court than in classic volleyball, and the playing area is slightly smaller. The question is whether the impacts from the ball would injure her or not. Moving on to silver medals, these are the sports where Lara could only be beaten by the world champion herself. Unlike judo, which focuses on using the opponent's force with discipline, wrestling relies more on strength and strategy. The goal is to score points through technical and reactive moves, which aligns more with Lara's fighting style. Leg strength is also useful, but the problem is that the impacts on the ground are often violent, and Lara's resistance to being crushed is weaker compared to her other skills. Given the minimalistic attire, which facilitates grips and holds, and considering Lara's ability to move several tons, her opponent would find it difficult to win without exposing themselves to Lara's strength. This type of terrain is where Lara truly excels. Her control of action and willingness to take risks would ensure victory. She would take improbable shortcuts at high speed with impressive accelerations. Never short of breath, she could only secure a top position. It is also the most robust type of bike in the competition. However, since it is still a vehicle, there is a high chance it might end up broken before the end of the race. This is the team sport most favorable to Lara. Unlike kayaking, rowing does not require turning, and the legs are also involved. This allows her to use her strength to propel her team towards victory. The only issue is whether the boat will hold up until the end of the race. Given Lara's agility, she would be perfectly capable of performing complex moves. The concern here is that we have never seen her do anything resembling this sport. Additionally, her long hair might hinder some movements. Although the sport is very stylish, it lacks grace. The movements are fast-paced, while Lara's strengths lie in elegance and flexibility. Lara is an excellent swimmer, particularly underwater, but this competition limits that method. She mainly swims the breaststroke, but what makes her very strong is her endurance, and we know that this is what makes a difference in the sport. Since she cannot use her underwater technique, a silver medal seems to be the most suitable. This sport is challenging to categorize as it consists of various disciplines where Lara might not necessarily be the top performer. For example, in sprinting she runs quickly, but not as fast as the best. Many of these sports involve the use of objects. She would likely throw the javelin very far, but it can be argued that we rarely see her throw objects that far. She would excel in long jump, high jump, and triple jump. However, several of the remaining events depend on initial speed. While she jumps significantly further than average, some athletes might jump further due to their faster running speed. Given these uncertainties, a silver medal seems more likely. And finally, the sports where Lara would be capable of winning a gold medal. As this sport eliminates the risk of injury from falls when the jumps are executed correctly, and since Lara always executes her jumps perfectly, she would undoubtedly have the opportunity to perform high-level aerial acrobatics with no risk. In terms of agility, she is unbeatable, so a gold medal is certain. Similarly, Lara has impressive strength in both her arms and legs. This sport poses no risk of collisions or crushing injuries for her, as she is simply stronger than the weight limits that other athletes in her weight category can handle. It's also worth noting that she doesn't tire when pushing or pulling multiple blocks in a row, unlike ordinary humans. With certainty, a gold medal. Lara likely holds the world record for the highest dive without injury, thanks to her body being optimally shaped for water entry. Her agility allows her to perform figures with grace, and she has no fear of heights. The most challenging part will be climbing the ladder, but that doesn't affect the score. Therefore, the gold medal is well deserved. Finally, a combat sport that allows the use of legs to strike. Lara has fought several times using similar techniques. Here, the helmet is not a hindrance as it is necessary to ensure the safety of the opponent. Since keeping an opponent on the ground is generally not allowed and points are scored based on strikes, a gold medal is certainly within reach. It's also the sport where it was easiest to generate AI images, which suggests that the database featuring Lara doing taekwondo is more extensive. It is easy to see that Lara aims with precision and speed, including with a pistol. Given that shooting with long-range weapons is straightforward for her, the gold medal is assured. Whether using a weapon or a rudimentary bow, Lara never misses her target. With stabilized bows and optimized arrows targeting a fixed point in the competition, it is hard to imagine how she could fail to win the gold medal. Unsurprisingly, climbing is the discipline where Lara is unbeatable. Being inexhaustible, she can cling to a cliff for hours, grip seemingly impossible ledges, and has no fear of heights. With her incredible balance, the climbing courses at the Olympics are not just easy for her, they are child's play. Gold medal without hesitation, though there is still one sport where Lara is even stronger. This is the sport where Lara can utilize her greatest strengths: jumping, flexibility, precision, endurance, and above all, her grace. The discipline is divided into 4 categories where she will undoubtedly excel: the vault, which involves a run-up followed by a high leap, and acrobatics, the uneven bars, where hand strength is crucial, the balance beam, which requires balance, and the floor exercise, where she must perform as many figures as possible within a set time. There is also rhythmic gymnastics, which includes other events. Given that she never misses her landings, she will find the best combinations of movements. Although she has a tendency to get injured quickly when she falls, this is never the case when she performs a controlled acrobatic move. Her precision is legendary to the point where all her jumps cover exactly the same distance. She can jump forwards and then backwards, landing at her starting point, or do the same while performing a mid-air somersault. Once the movement is initiated, she seamlessly transitions between figures, ignoring everything around her. She dedicates a large part of her estate to a gymnastic course. and it is the first thing we discover about her in the first game. Before becoming an adventurer, Lara is an extraordinary acrobat, completely unbeatable. This is the major difference between her and Indiana Jones or Nathan Drake. She is an adventurer, an archaeologist, and an acrobat. What do you think of this tier list? I'll leave you to discuss it in the comments section. Special thanks to the subscribers and donors who make this content possible. Even though AIs help, it's important to remember that producing a scripted video takes time. The algorithm doesn't care, but it thrives on controversy, so don't hesitate to create some out of thin air. It might help. Consequently, I'll add that The Lord of the Rings wasn't that great of a film. Dogs are better than cats. Diet Coke tastes the same as regular Coke, and so on. It's a funny world we live in. Goodbye.